What happens when you die, Hugh, do you think?
I've just been reading about it this morning.
Oh, somebody knows? Somebody wrote a book about it?
Yeah, it's called the Bhagavad Gita, and I was just reading it today. And I remember reading this thing, and it tells you what to do at that moment of death. And I remember thinking, oh man, this is like a fairy tale to me, because I've never actually faced a moment of prolonged knowing I was going to die, or thinking I was going to die. I haven't had that moment yet. But I have had a glimpse into what it will be like for me. I was researching this movie, The Fountain. I play a brain surgeon, so I was invited in to see some surgery. This woman, and just before we went in, the doctor told me that the woman was going to die. It was a recurrence of a tumour, and it was the size of he said almost the size of a tennis ball in her brain. He said, we're going to operate on it. And they kept her awake. It was the most extraordinary thing. They kept her awake so that they knew, as they're cutting into the tumour, whether they're cutting into speech parts of the brain or movement. So she was playing a kind of video game, lying down, the entire skull, the top half of the skull is off. And they're cutting in and they're asking her questions. She has to play this video game. But I've gone past the point. As she was wheeled in, I just had the information that she was going to die. And she had blonde hair. My wife has blonde hair. And for about a second, I almost was sick from the fear of thinking, what if that was her? And then I won't lie to you, then almost straight after that came the idea, what if it was me? And I was terrified, absolutely terrified. Because bottom line is, for all the work you might do in your life to prepare for that moment, I realised I was miles off it, miles off being ready. I mean, I think if I could aspire to anything, that great story about Socrates on his death, when he'd taken the poison, and the poison was going through his body, and he's explaining how it's going up his body, and he's starting to go numb in his feet, and his disciples, I suppose, for want of a better word, are crying, and he turned to him and says, why are you crying? I've prepared my whole life for this moment. And he was fine with it. He was absolutely fine. And in fact, quite calmly explaining what was going on in his body, because he wasn't attached to his life in the same way he wasn't attached to death. I think death, you said at the beginning of this interview, you said, I'm going to ask you a very simple question. What is God? And I think death is as simple as that. I think it's another moment. It's another moment that we live through. And my feeling is, whilst our attachment to the sensorial life, which is really our connection to this, it's really our only connection, real, to this creation, is what we perceive through the senses. That goes, that somehow the soul, or the God within you, kind of carries on. I don't know. Maybe it takes. I've read lots of different things. You go into some kind of waiting area. You take on another body. I mean, I grew up with the whole idea of heaven and hell, and there'll be judgment. And I think there probably is, but I think it's just more simple, cause and effect. Whatever happens beyond death will be due to what's been going on in your mind at that moment of dying.